90% of the population, and losers, the overwhelming majority, roughly 90%. These are shown in the graphs that I passed out. 3 points shown by these graphs need to be emphasized. First is how acutely skewed these income redistributions are. The first graph shows that in the U.S., even the top 5 to 1% has not benefited greatly from these 30 years of upward redistributions. Equally noteworthy is that roughly 40% of the redistribution enjoyed by the top 1% has gone to its top 1%. The second point to note is that the last graph shows that what has happened to income shares in France, Spain, and the Netherlands during the same period is fundamentally different from what has happened in the U.S. and the U.K. This means that the redistributions are country-specific rather than the consequences of a global trend, and thus more than likely due to government policy. The third point to note from the first 5 graphs is that the redistributions of income to the top 1% in the U.S. and the U.K. have taken place regardless of which political party was in power. Accepting matters of national security in both the U.K. and the U.S., as in most countries, the material standard of living is almost universally accepted as the primary measure of its population's welfare. Even those political parties commonly identify with the interests of the wealthy, the conservatives in the UK and the Republicans in the US, have won their seats by convincing the majority of their policies would best serve their material interests by generating larger GDP gains that would be shared between income groups. In the US and the UK, no political party could win elections by openly campaigning on a platform of redistributing income upward to the richest 1% of the population. But given that governments in recent decades have effected these redistributions, it follows that the real agendas and platforms of the winning parties have been kept secret. Furthermore, in the US and the UK, either of the two major political parties could win elections if, unlike their opponents, they campaign in the usual way, but on a promise to stop or stop or reverse the redistribution of income to the ultra rich. Because only 1% of the population benefits from these upward redistributions, and the standard of living of at least 90% suffer from them, it does not seem credible that the electors would knowingly vote for their continuation. Furthermore, my 6 graphs illustrate the situation in a way that could be easily and quickly grasped by the average voter. An election campaign that focused on such graphs or the equivalent would have little difficulty getting the true significance of the election across to the majority of the voters. But currently, the populations of the U.S. and the U.K. appear to be nearly totally ignorant of the fact that for over 30 years, their countries have been subject to the engineering of huge and extremely skewed upward redistributions of income. The central fact of contemporary political and economic existence for these countries is virtually never discussed in the general media. Together, these points imply a change in the political structure of these countries. Why? Because if the major political parties have before them a straightforward way of winning elections by appealing to the basic material interests of the overwhelming majority of the electorate, and they repeatedly decline to do so even when it means defeat, then there must be a non-democratic reason that governs their decisions and their actions institutions and the new political economic system that makes them possible. They even have a name for it. They call it plutonymy. It is the term used by the backers of this political ideology, this political movement, and this concept of government, whose primary players belong to the financial sector. The history of plutonymy's conceptual development remains clouded in secrecy. But the fact that plutonymy as a real-world political phenomenon is conceptually driven rather than merely an historical accident emerged to public view in 2005 when the first of three Citigroup documents prepared for its wealthiest clients were leaked. The first one was called Plutonymy, Buying Luxury, Explaining Global Imbalances. The second, Revisiting Plutonymy, The Rich Getting Richer. And the third, the Plutonymy Symposium, Rising Tides Lifting Yachts. The third one was in 2006. Citigroup has gone and continues to go to great lengths to suppress these documents. Websites which post them receive threats of legal action if they are not immediately taken down. Here, in the plutonymous vernacular, the ideology's key points and their strategic view of the world. The world is divided into two blocks. The plutonomies, where economic growth is powered and largely consumed by the wealthy few and the rest. We project that the plutonomies, the US, UK, and Canada, will likely see even more income inequality, disproportionately feeding off a further rise in the profit share in their economies. We think the plutonymy is here, is going to get stronger, its membership swelling from globalized enclaves in the emerging world. The US, UK, and Canada are world leaders in plutonymy. Countries and regions that are not plutonomies, Scandinavia, France, Germany, the rest of continental Europe except Italy, and Japan. At the heart of plutonymy is income inequality. Societies that are willing to tolerate, endorse income inequality are willing to tolerate, endorse plutonymy. And the reports identify three things that have enabled the creation of plutonomies. One is asset booms, two, a rising profit share, and three, favorable treatment by governments. The reports also consider what could go wrong. Here's a quote. The rising wealth gap between the rich and the poor will probably at some point lead to a political backlash. While the rich are getting a greater share of the wealth and the poor a lesser share, political enfranchisement remains as was, one person, one vote. At some point, it is likely that labor will fight back against the rising profit share of the rich, and there will be a political backlash against the rising wealth of the rich. We don't see this happening yet, though there are signs of rising political tensions. However, we are keeping a close eye on developments. These three plutonymy traps contain many interesting points, but the most significant one for me is that plutonymists see the subversion of the democratic process, be about 5 minutes, as the ultimate key to their success. If, as they say, the political enfranchisement remains and is allowed to remain, then the economic disenfranchisement of the masses is only possible if they can be bamboozled into voting against their interests. So, how does plutonymy gain political dominance? I see three primary means by which plutonymists gain and keep political power. One, the radically skewed upward redistributions of income are kept out of the news and public discussion. primary policies of the major political parties affecting and preserving the income redistributions are kept a secret from the election to the electorate. 3, the major political parties cannot, because of their financial and media dependence on the economists, campaign on a platform or in a manner that would jeopardize the upward redistributions of income. So how does Plutonymy relate to financial bubbles? Plutonymy's power base is the financial rather than the industrial sector of the economy. The U.S. and UK economies have been financialized, meaning that the financial sector no longer sees its primary function as serving the financial needs of the industrial sector. Instead, financial assets are seen as ends in themselves. Under financialization, fortunes are sought not through profits of economic production, but rather through financial assets themselves. This pursuit takes 3 primary and interconnected forms. 1, creation of leverage of Ponzi schemes that enable huge expansion of one's financial holdings. 2, the securitizing of debts, often in a fraudulent manner. 3, profiting from changes in the values of financial assets. What are the consequences of these practices? The financial sector's profit-seeking activities become focused primarily on buying, selling, packaging, and repackaging of either existing financial assets or new ones attached to existing real assets. Success of this pursuit and the creation of financial bubbles are interlinked. Leverage is used both to increase asset holdings and to artificially inflate their price. The rising prices attract investors from outside of the Plutonymy's inner core, which inflates prices still more until eventually the bubbles burst, usually with the original inner core selling off near the top. But if the whole show should run amok, no worry, the Plutonymy's government will use taxpayers' money to bail out the biggest players. So in conclusion, how does this pertain regarding global crises and our session's question, how deep and for how long? The political economic structure that created the current political crisis, the global economic crisis, and also the IT bubble and crash that preceded it, is unlikely to change anytime soon. True, there is in the United States, and to a lesser extent in the UK, much public anger regarding the recent collapse and its consequences. But until very recently, there's been neither a constructive and realistic narrative, nor an organizational vehicle through which to harness the public anger. Instead, the Tea Party movement was cleverly funded by Plutonymists as a means of channeling public anger in a way that strengthens the political base of the economy and thereby increases the likelihood of more asset bubbles and more upward redistribution of income. The recent emergence of the Occupy or 99% movement is, for the Democrat, a step in the right direction. It is also the sort of thing that the Citigroup reports cite as the ultimate danger to continued Plutonymy rule. But the movement still exists only at the margins, nor is there yet at the public level a narrative that identifies the relevant political structures and explains how their policies have been created and are likely in the future